All right, welcome back to Niners Nightly, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the Niners and the Eagles. Showdown Sunday in Philly should be a good one. Niners coming off an ugly loss. Eagles actually coming off a loss, but it wasn't an ugly loss because they rested their guys. But with us on the UMA guest line to break it down is the Eagles beat writer who covers them for The Athletic. Brooks Kubina is with us. And Brooks, thanks for your time. Appreciate you jumping on.
Yeah, happy to be here. At this time of year, it wouldn't, me selfishly, be a bad thing to be in San Francisco or anywhere in California, but hey, you got to deal with the winter over here.
Yeah, I was going to say, but the Niners sound like they're going to miss most of the weather. I mean, I'm going to be there for it on Sunday, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be awful. It doesn't sound like it's going to be snow or really cold. It sounds kind of moderate, huh?
Yeah, it won't be the snow game of the wild card last year for the divisional round for the Eagles last year, which looks good on NFL films and it's kind of fun to be around. But now they had that going into the end of the regular season, so it should be all right.
Tell us a little bit about the Eagles, man. I mean, Niners didn't play the Eagles this year, so we know they're coming off a game where Tanner McKee lost to the Commanders. But as I said, there's not a lot you can take away from that performance. But what kind of year has it been for the Eagles?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year. This was them going into the year one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl, and that was built around a lot of the consistency they had on the roster, especially on offense. So going into the year, the knowledge was that you had all but one starter on the offense returning, and that's right guard Tyler Steen, who has performed well this year. And the whole question was, would the transition from Kellen Moore, who was the offensive coordinator and play caller from last year, who got the head coaching job at the Saints, would the transition from him to Kevin Patullo, who was a first-time offensive coordinator, be a smooth one? And so far this year, that answer has been no. Their inefficiency has been pretty consistent throughout the year. They've managed a lot of different type of game plans, partly because of trying to find things that work consistently, and also because they're the reigning Super Bowl champions, and all of the contenders they're facing and the parity schedule are giving them a lot of looks that they weren't expecting. So they're having to balance all these things with the first-time offensive coordinator, with an offense that hasn't been pretty inefficient at times. There's been shots of glory throughout the year. Jalen Hurts had a perfect passer rating against the Vikings, and you see bits and pieces of A.J. Brown, one of the better wide receivers in the NFL, pop off in a certain game. And very rarely have we seen the run game with Saquon Barkley, who was the offensive player of the year last year, set the full season rushing record last year. He's at times been inefficient in the run game. They've all been pretty self-accountable through the year. And the thing that's made up for this, why they're still the NFC East Division champions, why they're still the favorite in this game against the 49ers, is because of their defense. And Vic Fangio's a name that San Franciscans remember, and he's one of the better defensive minds, and they are a top 5 defense. Again, they were number 1 last year. And a lot of the games they've won this year have been because of the defense. Offensive players have said that. Think of the Rams game where Jordan Davis blocked a field goal at the end. They had a pick 6 against the Buccaneers that helped them out in that game. They had a 2-point stand against the Bills that won that one as well. Those games, they're in the playoffs partly because of this defense. And think of 2023. That is a season that Philadelphians are trying to banish from their memory, but they had a very bad defense that year that led to Vic Fangio's hiring. Without that, this would be a very similar season. So they're going into this year, this postseason, knowing that they can possibly stay close in games and pull it off because of their defense. And if their offense can finally get it together, and they've tried a lot of different things over the year that they can reach in the bag and try, then this might be a dangerous team. But there's a lot of question marks as they enter this postseason.
Let's talk about the offense and drill down there, because I think it's interesting. You look at the receivers, the leading receivers in these between these two teams. I mean, Christian McCaffrey's got 102 receptions. He's a running back. The Niners, he's their leading receiver. Their second leading receiver is George Kittle, their tight end, with 57 receptions. Then you look over across the way at the Eagles, and A.J. Brown's got 78 catches, and Devontae Smith has 77. So, I mean, it's almost like they've got 2 number 1 receivers. They're equally sharing reception-wise. How how are they utilized differently? Is Devontae more the downfield guy? How do they use Brown? How do they use Smith?
Interchangeably in terms of deep shots, both of them are very good at that. The concepts over the last couple of years boiled down to a philosophy of basically chasing matchups in certain situations. If they get a single high and Jalen Hurts looks over and AJ Brown's got the mismatch, they have pursued that matchup. If it's Devontae Smith, they'll pursue that matchup. Devontae Smith, over the years, I've seen him be a lot involved in the play action game. This year, we've seen that from him. In the Super Bowl last year, people remember he had the kill shot against the Chiefs. He is a very good deep ball catcher. And A.J. Brown, I would say more, not that Devontae Smith is not a matchup winner, but fewer as good as A.J. Brown in tight spaces, whether that's in press coverage or otherwise, getting free, getting an open on a man on a slant or what have you. Both of them are very good. And Howie Roseman, the GM of the Eagles, spent almost a decade trying to get his quarterbacks plus receivers on that side of the ball. Now he's got two of them. That's partly why there have been a little bit of frustration throughout the offense this year, is because they have two of those guys and they have less catches than these, a running back and a tight end on the other side for the 49ers. And trying to figure out who their identity is over this year. Is that pursuing their receivers? Is that Saquon Barkley or otherwise? They have two guys that can they can attack it. They feel confident in doing that whenever they have the opportunity or otherwise. So that's what they have in both of those receivers.
Evaluate Hurts. There are people that think he's one of the best quarterbacks in football. He's got a Super Bowl ring from a year ago. There's other people. I've heard some of my buddies in Philly are like, Tanner McKee's better, and they had to go with Tanner McKee. So, let me just say this. There's a wide disparity of opinions here on Jalen Hurts, and there's probably a wide disparity as well on Brock Purdy, to be completely honest. But what do you see with Hurts? What's the weakness in his game from your vantage point?
Jalen Hurts, if you listen, and recently I did go back through every press conference he's done since getting to Philly and listening to all the coaches that have talked about him, you get the impression that if a coach went up to him and said, "Hey, we're going to run the wishbone this week," he would do it. He's had 6 offensive coordinators throughout his career. That defines kind of how he's been the good soldier here in Philly, taking on a new system, trying it out. But it's not that he doesn't have his own opinions about what his strengths are, what he can do. But that has been the challenge of his career to this point. And to this year, you look at a lot of the different ways the Eagles have tried to play, whether that's under center, which is not what Jalen Hurts had done in college or really towards the beginning of his career. He's done that in large spots this year, and that's a progression for him, and he's done well in those. The Vikings game is a good example of that. And then there are others like shotgun-oriented, pass-oriented concepts like against the Chargers, where if there is a weakness that I'm looking at, it's not so much a weakness, it's what they don't do often. I did a story earlier in the year after that Chargers game, because in the middle of the field, which I'm just going to leave it at that. I drew a diagram of that, but that's kind of difficult to describe in words. But compared to the other quarterbacks in the last 5 years that are good in overall, Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and others, in terms of efficiency and quarterback rating and all those stats, Jalen Hurts is just the same as all those quarterbacks when throwing over the middle, but his attempts are almost half. And I wondered about that, and that's something that I believe that with the Eagles, they like him in terms of, say, like a three-point shooter in the NBA. Somebody can have a wide range of taking three-point shots like Steph Curry, but you might not have other players shoot at that volume. That is something that I've wondered if the Eagles wanted to attack that zone more. Would that efficiency, would that quarterback rating, would that success be the same for Jalen? The other part of it is this year, he hasn't been running as often as he's used to. That's something that's been a part of his game ever since high school. It's not that he's not a good passer. He's a great passer in a lot of ways, but that has opened up things in the offense. including last year in 2024 between him and Saquon that really led to a lot of the success they had that year. Part of that, you look at it, Jalen Hurts is now entering the postseason for the first time without any kind of injury. Last year, he was dealing with a concussion. The year before, a finger injury, and so on. So that has a little bit to do with it. So how much of his game is going to be opened up in the postseason? Will he be running more frequently and run pass options and otherwise? And will they attack the mid zones whenever defenses force them into that? Those are things that I'm going to be looking at as they try and attack this, because a lot of the things this year and on the defensive side, you've seen a lot more zone coverage against the Eagles. They can't so often pursue those one-on-one matchups with A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. That means, making tight throws and tight windows over the middle, and sometimes that's unavoidable. So that's going to be really interesting as the playoffs continue, because that's been some of the things and challenges he's faced this year.
Brooks Kubina with us, the Eagles beat writer from The Athletic. A quarterback's best friend is a great running game for sure, and Barkley a year ago was awesome. This year, not so much. I mean, I'm just looking at his game log. He's got 5 games this year where he had under 3 yards a carry. I mean, under 3 yards a carry is pretty much being stymied. This is one of the best backs in football, behind arguably the best line. So to see 5 games under 3 yards a carry is alarming. And then just looking at his game log for the last, for the season, he's got 2 receptions in the last 5 games. They've totally not thrown him the ball really since, late November. Is there a reason for that? How do you look at the year Barkley's had this year, and how do you make sense of those numbers?
Yeah, Saquon Barkley, part of it is, one of the things that I keep returning to is that his yards before contact this year are about as on par as it was when he was with the Giants. One of the reasons that he came to Philadelphia last offseason was because of the quality of the offensive line. That has not been up to standard this year, and players like left tackle Jordan Mailata, they have owned that. So there are a lot of things that go into that. I've talked earlier about how there's been some systemic issues with this year's system under first-time offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo. There are things that they've been sorting out. Offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland has been a part of that too. He's their run game coordinator. Whether you're looking at the film and you're seeing, okay, well, that doesn't look advantageous to the situation, nor the play, nor what they're trying to do. And then there are other situations where you say, well, that guy clearly missed that block, whether it's on the offensive line or a tight end or otherwise. There are things throughout the year that just kind of pop off the page in a lot of different directions. Saquon Barkley himself has talked to his locker about, how he owns some of the issues too, like making the wrong cut or not, getting yards where he should. So it's a holistic issue, the run game. And I return to, again, Jalen Hurts' involvement in that, which has been down, which is another thing to add within that, is if he's involved more in the playoffs, will that help alleviate some of the other issues? One of the big things right now is Lane Johnson's coming back. They're all-pro right tackle, maybe the best tackle in the NFL, and he's missed the last 6 games or so for the Eagles. And him coming back into it, Kevin Patullo was talking about it on Tuesday, how he's him being one of the best right tackles in the league. That's going to help a lot of the things they try. So does that open things up for Saquon? So it's an interesting thing. One of the mini puzzles of this season that you didn't really think was going to happen going into this year.
Let's flip the card and talk a little bit about Fangio's defense for a second. One of the things that stands out when you look at the Eagles statistically that it's kind of a surprise is that the Niners have had a disaster year sacking the quarterback, right? They can't get to the quarterback. It's 20 sacks. They're dead last in the league by a ton. Eagles have more than twice as many sacks. They have 42 sacks. What's interesting to me, though, their leader in sacks is Jalix Hunt. He's got 3. Their leading sack guy has 3 sacks. So I looked up their stat numbers for the year. 14 different players have gotten at least a half sack this year for Philadelphia. So Fangio, does that illustrate that there's a weakness there, or does that illustrate that Fangio's sending everybody from everywhere at any moment?
Well, I mean, I think part of that is how they share that. Jalix Hunt with 6.5 sacks this year is just a little bit above Moro Ojomo, who had a great year replacing Milton Williams. He has 6 sacks himself. So
Yeah, I said three. I think 6.5
he-
sacks
I think you
for
meant
Hunt.
interceptions for him. He
Yeah,
leads.
yeah. I was looking at the interceptions. He's got 3 interceptions leading the team,
Yeah,
but he has 6.5 sacks, and still 6.5 for a team that had more than double the Niners sack total. I would have thought somebody would have had 8, 9, 10, but no.
part of that is because of the injuries at the front end of the year. I mean, going into this, they had Josh Sweat left in the offseason going to the Cardinals in free agency, and then they cycled again through. I mean, y'all are familiar with Bryce Huff in the trade leading to that. They've been trying to replace through the draft and bolstering up the outside edge, and then they brought in a lot of guys on 1-year deals in free agency, and a lot of them got hurt on the front end of the season. So they brought Brandon Graham back in from retirement in the middle of the season because of a lot of the depth issues they were having there. So that's part of the reason that some of the sack numbers are down. Nolan Smith, who took a level up in the playoffs last year, he was dealing with the torn triceps at the beginning of the year. His numbers are down this year with 3 sacks, but overall, like the sack numbers are still there for the team across the board. That goes back to the main thing about the defensive front, where you have Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis along the interior. I think everybody knows about Jalen Carter. He is a game breaker, game wrecker of all proportions. Jordan Davis, I would say, this year has been one of the biggest differences. He has doubled his snap total. He has talked a lot throughout his career about it being available, what his conditioning's like. Him getting that blocked field goal against the Rams and then taking the ball and running it all the way across the field for a touchdown. This has been a step for him. They all talk about how they work in tandem as a rush, and you can watch the film. And Moro Ojomo has talked about it himself. He'll get a sack, but the attention that's paid to Jalen Carter is frequently seen. So you're seeing that a lot. I think that explains that number. And Vic Fangio doesn't blitz a lot, but when he does, it's effective. Zach Brown and Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean both involved in that. And Nakobe Dean's numbers are in there. He's got 4 sacks for the year. So it is pretty spread across the board, and I think that's owed to not only the system Fangio runs, but he's pressing the right keys too.
Well, and they've got an abundance of riches at certain spots. I mean, Zach Bond, Nakobe Dean, and then behind those guys, Jeremiah Trotter and Jihad Campbell. And those Trotter and Campbell both had double-digit tackles last week, and those guys are backing up. I mean, the Niners are looking at that going, wow. The Niners are signing Kazir White, the former Eagle, and going with Eric Kendricks. Just trying to piece it together in the 11th hour. They've got a couple of draft picks, one guy a first-round pick, one guy a fifth-round pick, that are just sitting there ready whenever their number's called, and they're fresh and they're ready, and there's no reps for them to get with Bond and Dean there. I'm sure they'll let Dean walk as a free agent at the end of the year and replace him with one of those two guys. What is the weakness of this D? What do you see as the weakness?
Well, entering the season and throughout the year, my eye was always on the secondary because that was what had experienced so much change, especially on the outside. The Isaiah Rodgers and Darius Slay both departed in the offseason, and that CB2 spot was open for grabs throughout training camp. And a lot of people in the building thought Keely Ringo, their former 4th-round pick, was going to take the job. He regressed and hasn't played that much all this season. So one of their 1-year deal guys, Adoree Jackson, who had kind of a remedial role with the Giants last year, Vic Fangio has called him a survivor this year because if he had any game where he had regressed, he was going to pull a trick and go to somebody else. We had seen that sometimes. They traded for Jacorian Bennett, who had some starting experience with the Raiders, and traded for Jair Alexander, a former Pro Bowler for the Green Bay Packers, with some injuries. He ended up retiring. But they keep stocking that side, and I keep watching to see if this is the moment that side of the secondary breaks. But Adoree Jackson's been a survivor. There have been times where they've given up explosive passes. I think that's one of the weaknesses that this Eagles team has. They've been doing it more than they did last year, but they don't give up touchdowns after that. Like against the Bills, there was a 50-yard pass, and then immediately after that, they forced a fumble and got the turnover. So I look at that. One of the ways that Vic Fangio has protected that secondary speaks to how good Quinyon Mitchell is playing on the outside at cornerback. He was named a Pro Bowler this year, and well deserved, because he has been matched up against the best of the best every week. And he even switched fields and traveled with receivers at the start of the year. So I always wondered whenever they start targeting Adoree Jackson or finding holes in the secondary, exploiting that side, or figuring out a way to occupy Quinyon Mitchell and attack the rest of the zone. Those were the things that I was looking at. Now they're dealing with some injuries on the back end. They lost their second round rookie Andrew Makuba, who was doing really well and developing across the year, and then had to turn to their practice squad and Marcus Epps, but even he has played well at certain spots. So that there has yet to be exploited, but it's one of those precarious personnels that I'm just wondering if that's the thing that's going to break.
What do you think of Sirianni? You're covering this team. You probably have a lot of brushes with him. He comes across kind of as, I don't know, kind of a goofball. I mean, this whole, when he mugged. No, I can't remember. I've been watching the NFL for decades. I mean, I can't remember more than one coach ever that mugged for the cameras. He kind of mugs for the cameras, and he's had little things where he's trotting off the field and he's talking trash to fans. And he just seems like one of those guys that he's just, he's easy to dislike. I don't know why, but what's he like to cover?
Well, it's an interesting way to follow that introduction on that, but I've covered about 4 or 5 head coaches in the NFL, and like to some of the things you're describing there, Nick Sirianni has been an evolution in terms of how he handles his emotions on the sideline. I don't think he ever wants to hide who he is, which if you look back, I mean, he was a wide receiver at Mountain Union, which is I believe a Division III college. And you can see kind of like highlights where he's jawing at players. He was probably the guy that you liked having on your team, but hated when he was on the other team. There have been players I've heard who've said kind of that similar thing whenever they've been in the NFL around him. But in that sense, like he connects with players in that way. Players, I've seen him and heard him described as a player's coach. Think of the last game where Devontae Smith, he was 40 yards shy of 1,000 yards, and in my opinion, it's kind of reckless to play Devontae Smith in a game that no starters are playing when he's that big a deal to your offense that's been inefficient. But he asked Devontae if he wanted to play, and Devontae was like, yeah. So he fields this game plan to keep him safe as much as he could, gets the 1,000 yards, and then yanks him off the field. So you see these kind of things where he's aware of what his players want, and he's constantly in communication with them throughout the year. So going into the last couple of years, a lot of the conversation has been about, okay, he's an offensive-minded coach, but how much involvement does he have in the play calling? Last year, whenever he took a step back and gave more control to Kellen Moore over the system, that was his step towards his management of a team. And then you started watching him and how he, created a lot of the other foundation. I say, as I was looking throughout this year and the past year, one of the things that I've noticed is just a lot of the operation throughout the week. That shouldn't be understated, because I've covered teams that are very dysfunctional in terms of people knowing what they're supposed to do and where they're supposed to be and what the goal is. The Eagles don't have that problem. Like, the problems that they deal with are, okay, how do I fix this problem? We know when they've identified all the things that are there, and I think that's to Nick Sirianni's credit. So seeing how he operates in that way, there are a lot of things through that. And then again, whenever he takes back and he's got a CEO kind of level, part of that is managing the culture of the team. Now, Philadelphia is a tough place to play, to coach, and all that. The criticism, and I'm part of that. I am one of the critics in this city, and there are parts that could be more dramatic than I think they were at the beginning of the year. Their AJ Brown, one of their wide receivers, is a bit disgruntled with some of the his role in the offense and things like that, and he was taking to social media and other ways like that. I think other coaches in other places maybe not have handled that as well. I think to Nick Sirianni's credit, a lot of things that could have been a bigger deal elsewhere weren't. So they've had extreme success with the Eagles in how he manages coaches and their time and the players that they have. I mean, they're in the 5th playoff run in a row. They haven't missed with him. So I think a lot of that, even though people on the outside are watching TV and might not like however he looks or is acting or things like that, but the success is undeniable.
Sure. 2 last ones, Brooks. We appreciate your time. You've covered other sports. You've lived in other markets. This is an edgy market. Some people would say Philly's the angriest market in America. The sports fans are really, really intense, and there's a lot of, there's a lot of noise. Let's just say. Have you found yourself becoming edgier as a writer in Philly because of the noise, because of the climate, because of the culture, than maybe you were when you covered LSU and Baton Rouge, or when you covered, a team in Houston? Do you find yourself edgier as a writer because you're in that market?
No, but I'm opening up my Twitter, and on my banner I have something that my very first introduction story, and I look at the comments, which I looked at the comments, which I don't do as much anymore. The first comment was pretty.
That right there is that right there is an indication that you don't look at the comments that much.
Pretty bummed we have F. Scott Fitzgerald covering my favorite sports team, which is the biggest compliment I could ever get.
Right.
I've been, I've covered LSU football, and that was a crazy sports diehard place as well.
Right.
And my job and the way I approach it has not changed because of any kind of environment. But I am aware when people want more or are on me for certain things that I'm writing. But they're with the Eagles in terms of just like this season and other their fanaticism for the team, and I can like whenever I'm in the press box and they turn around and they're like talking to us, I'm kind of grateful sometimes for the glass that's there. Like I like open air press box, but I don't know. It's funny, but I don't think it affects my job. I appreciate the thirst for the stories and stuff, because you see that, and at the end of the day, that's what's keeping me employed. So it's a good situation to be in whenever people are interested in what you have to write.
Well, their people are going to have a lot of interest in what you have to write in this game. Why? Because this game is the NFL playoffs and its finality, and you win and you're moving on, and you got a Super Bowl dream, and it's very much alive, and this can get done, and you know what I mean? Or if you're done, it's like now it's time for the post-mortem and the blame game and the aftermath and who gets fired and all the different things that come along with that. So there's going to be a lot of people reading your stuff here the next day. A lot of people expect the Eagles to win. I probably expect the Eagles to win. But let's just say the Eagles don't win. Let's say the 49ers come to town and get the win. The season's over. Who's going to get the blame in Philly? What is it? Do you know? Is it all set up for Kevin Patullo, or is it predicated on how this game goes, and the truth within this game will provide that answer? Or is it going to be Sirianni? We know it's not going to be Roseman. He's on top of the football world. He's probably the hottest GM in the game right now. Who's going to get blamed by everybody in Philly if they lose?
Well, it depends how they lose.
Sure. So it is dependent on that.
It's always dependent on that. But the consistent thing throughout this year I'm looking at, if you're wondering kind of a who's on the hot seat kind of question.
Right.
This is the first year in terms of EPA, which measures efficiency on the field for both sides of the ball. This is the first time with their total offensive EPA has been negative under Nick Sirianni. And that tells a lot about how this season has gone offensively, with kind of belies the talent that they have. And it's notable to me that Nick Sirianni fired Brian Johnson, a former offensive coordinator, in 2023 when he had better production. So the question is, if the season ends after this weekend, is there enough to say that Kevin Patullo should be back? And if so, then what will it look like? Vic Fangio, his work throughout this season and his respect has been earned. He can stand on a lot of that. The questions there are this offense. I don't think there are questions about Nick Sirianni and his leadership and the way that this team is. They're in their, they just won a back-to-back NFC East division title. The question to me is, how are things going to change on the offensive side? And you're then looking at kind of down the line, like, what does that mean for the offense? Who it'd be a seventh offensive coordinator for Jalen Hurts, who's entering the second year of his 4-year extension. So, I mean, to look even further down the line, what maximizes Jalen Hurts? You got to think further down there. It's not really feasible, or really that's not. I'm just saying, like, whenever they're looking at that, you got to think who's going to work in that sense. And then also AJ Brown throughout the year. Is this a rectifiable situation, or does it matter who the play caller is going to be? Those are the questions that immediately come up. Is that something where they trust Patullo to do that? What argument could they stand on that? And who would they bring in instead? And if that would change their personnel or how they would go about that in the future.
It's going to be fun to watch. Niners need a win to extend their season. The Eagles expect to win. They're at home. They're rested. It's going to be fun to watch for sure. And, of course, we'll have it for you on the Sports Leader. And, Brooks, thanks for stopping by. Brooks, a great follow on X at BKubena, BKUBENA on X. Follow him, check him out, and read him in The Athletic. Brooks, thanks for jumping on, man. The Athletic never disappoints, man. They get some really good people, and you're really on your game. Thanks for jumping on KNBR and giving us a breakdown.
Anytime.
Brooks Kubena. We got more straight ahead on Niners Nightly, which will continue next on the Sports Leader.